Hello, and welcome to Verbally. I'm teacher Oakley. For the next hour, we will be examining and learning about the past continuous verb tense. Specifically, we'll look at how it's formed, basic form in negatives, questions, and positive statements. And then we're going to look at the various uses of the verb, and students will take turns practicing a little sentence construction to illustrate that particular usage of the verb. And we'll talk about it as well in relation to other verb tenses and probably some other special situational, circumstantial use, some other relevant facts that will be introduced as well. Okay, that's the plan. So Heidi, welcome back. Hello again.
Hello, nice to see you again. The past 2
Likewise.
days, it was very cold. Today, it's much better. I have a sore throat a little.
Oh, sorry to hear that. That's too bad. It's just to make you jealous. It's really hot here. Actually, this is my favorite time of the year here in the Philippines, November, December, January, because it's actually not that hot. It's a little hot, but there's a breeze, and it gets clouded. There's clouds in the sky, so the sun gets covered, so it's not blazing hot. And there's a breeze this time of year, and so it's the most pleasant temperature of the year. I love it. Actually, it's nice. Okay, well, you've had some classmates join us, so let me welcome them. Hello, Carlos Andreas. How are you?
Hi, teacher. Fine, and you?
I'm good. Nice to see you in class again. And Victor, welcome back.
Hello, nice to see you again.
Likewise. Always my pleasure. Demas, hello, how are you?
Yeah, hello, I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And Eunice has also joined us. Hi, Eunice.
Hello. How are you?
I'm okay.
I was drinking tea. Sorry.
How are you? Are you also having a cold? Do you have a cold?
No. I was drinking tea and I was trying to respond at the same time, so there was a very different.
All right. As long as you're okay, as long as you can survive. Okay, let's get started. Let's take a look at the forms and functions of the past continuous verb tense. Here we go. I'm going to do a screen share, and yep, we'll get started. Okie doke. Past continuous is formed by using was or were, the past tenses of the verb to be. I was, he was, it was, she was, singular, and the plural were. They were, we were, you were. Plus the present participle. The present participle, for those who don't know, is the main verb plus ing, the ing form of the verb, not to be mistaken with a gerund. You can tell that when we're using a continuous tense that it's the main verb because it follows the verb to be in present or past tense or future tense with will. And a gerund will be acting as a noun later. Well, perhaps it could be a subject, but it won't be the main verb. The main verb will be the one that follows the verb to be. Okay, some basic examples of how it looks in a sentence. You, subject, noun, the verb construction, were studying when she called. Okay. In a question form, as always, the first auxiliary or helper verb, in this case, were is a helper verb. First auxiliary first, it's inverted with the subject noun, were you studying? And finally, in a negative sentence, subject noun first, then the verb construction with not after the first auxiliary. You were not studying when she called. Normal spoken English, we would use the contracted form weren't. You weren't studying when she called. Okay, let's look at the uses. Well, let me quickly welcome Francisco to the class. Hey there, Francisco. Welcome.
Hi, teacher. I'm here again.
Wonderful. Very good. Okay. Let's look at how we use this verb tense. The first usage, and very common primary usage really, is to relate an interrupted action in the past. Looking at the little graph, the red line, all right, would indicate the ongoing or action with duration, and the little purple X here in the chart would indicate the interrupting action. Okay, so the past continuous indicates the longer action which was interrupted. The interruption is usually a shorter action which is presented in the simple past tense. Now, this purple X, purple X in the chart here can be an interruption, an action, a gunshot, a bell ringing, a knock on the door, what have you, or it can just be an interruption in time at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. So either way, let's look at some examples, and then I'll have you guys try this out. For example, I was watching TV. Red line, red line, red line. When she called. Purple X, purple X, purple X. Okay, I was watching TV when she called. There you go. Notice the interrupting action comes last in the sentence in this first example. In our next example, the interrupting action is first in a separate clause. When the phone rang, she was writing a letter. All right, so the purple X is first and the red line is second. Okay, the only difference being that we have a dependent clause, so we need a comma with this second example to separate the two clauses, and that has nothing to do with past continuous tense. Really, whenever we have a dependent clause first in a sentence, we need a comma. And normally we can put the dependent clause first or second, or if there's other clauses, makes no difference as to the meaning of the sentence. It doesn't matter if you say she was writing a letter when the phone rang, or you say when the phone rang she was writing a letter. There is absolutely zero difference in meaning. Okay, notice while we were having the picnic, it started to rain. Notice something here. It is very, very common. It is possible to use other connectives, other conjunctions to join two clauses when you're talking about two actions, interrupting action. But undoubtedly, the most common connectives are when and while. Notice when you see when introduces the interrupting action, and also it introduces that past simple past tense. Notice in our third example, we've introduced the continuous action We were having the picnic. The action of duration is being introduced by while. And then, okay, our independent clause is nothing. Okay, it's still, no doubt, past simple, but notice how they're introduced. When introduces the interrupting action, and while tends to introduce the continuous action. All right, in the question form, what were you doing when the earthquake started? In a question form, any question words, who, what, where, why, when, interrogatives are going to come in front of the first auxiliary, which is reversed with the subject noun. Again, this construction happens for all verb tenses, just pointing it out since here it is. Okay, here's another conjunction, a connecting conjunction. So, terrific. I was listening to my iPod, so I didn't hear the fire alarm. Okay, so it's possible to introduce an interrupting action with a different connective, a different conjunction. You were not listening to me when I told you to turn the oven off. Okay, very much the same thing. All right. Here we see some more examples. Pretty much the same ideas. Notice in the example, which is a dialogue, A and B speaking, what were you doing when you broke your leg? Okay, what was, all right, this person is asking, knows the interrupting action, broke your leg. He's asking about the action of duration. Notice the answer is just simple sentence in the past continuous. I was snowboarding. Okay, I don't need to elaborate again with when you broke your leg. It's already known. So this is normal. It's spoken English. Okay, interrupting action. Let's try it out. Let's see if you guys can make a sentence based on using maybe these examples. If you would like to attempt a question sentence or a negative sentence, it is possible. I wasn't doing anything when you called. It's possible to do a negative, okay? Whatever you would like, however you want to challenge yourself. Heidi, go ahead. You can try the first one.
I was reading a book on the bench in the park when a spider came down from the tree.
Okay, little Miss Moffat. Okay. Okay. A tree. We don't know which tree yet. All right. Okay. All right. Very good. Even all right. We have a lot of little prepositional phrases of place to help clarify the information. That's fine. It doesn't really change anything. Perfect. We've got the red line, continuous action with the interrupted action came down. By the way, phrasal verb, very physical here, physical meaning, but by the way, phrasal verbs are affected, they follow exactly the same rules. These are two-word verbs. They follow exactly the same rules as all of the other verbs in all of the other verb tenses. All right. Great job. Perfect. Carlos, Andreas, give this a try.
Okay. I was watching The Hobbit when my cell phone notifies me my English class.
My cell phone, what? notifies?
Okay. Um, how can I notify my English class? But let me correct the notifies. I don't know.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. First of all, first of all, I can't get past this. Notifies. This is present tense.
okay.
So it has to be past tense.
Okay.
The sentence just doesn't make any sense if the interrupting action is in the present tense. It is understood. I was watching The Hobbit, or I was reading a book. It is understood that this continuous action is finished. See, looking in the graph, it's before the present. Even though it's continuous action, that continuous action is over with. So, using a present tense makes no sense because nothing's happening in the present. It's over already.
Okay.
Both of these events that we're talking about are over. Okay.
Okay.
What did your cell phone notify?
When my cell phone
Rang. Okay. Let me just to illustrate something else, if I may take liberties with your sentence.
Okay.
Okay, notified me is possible if you have alerts on your phone. When my cell phone notified me, it was maybe time for class. Okay. Okay. Look, when my cell phone notified me, okay, we have a verb here. This is another phrase. It was time for class. Basically, this is all right. I've omitted that. This is a relative clause. We're going to stick another relative clause in here. Notice it's also in the past tense.
Okay.
Okay. Just wanted to make that point because it is possible to add other clauses, but notice that they also remain in the past tense because it's part of the interrupting action. It is possible to say I was watching The Hobbit and eating a snack. Okay, you can have two verbs. Fine, that's possible. And if they're two longer actions, they'd be both two past continuous. All right. It is possible to have multiple verbs. Okay, Victor, want to give it a try?
Okay. I was finishing my favorite video game when the power went out.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yes, it really happened a lot of times.
Yeah. Okay. Tragedy. Oh, the horror. Okay. It's interesting to me. I wasn't thinking about the actual content, but sorry, I can't help myself. I was thinking about the grammar. Yes, this is perfectly correct. It's interesting to me because the verb finish is kind of rarely used in a continuous tense because usually we think of the verb finish as a one-time boom action. I'm finished. I'm done. I'm finished. However, this is perfectly correct. It is possible to use the word finish as a continuous verb. Okay, he's in the action. Okay, it's a video game, so he was doing the last whatever he has to do to win the game. All right. It is possible to have finish as a continuous action of duration. Kind of rare, but it is possible. I've found it interesting because of that. Demas.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
can use a different verb, for example, in the ending? Or we have the same problem with the verb finish.
Yeah, they're synonymous, so it's basically it's basically the same problem. It's okay. It's okay to do this. It would be very common, though, to do this, if I could take liberties. Something like this. This is very common. I was just finishing.
Okay.
I was just ending. This helps clarify that you're near the end, but you're still continuing the action. This is common. Makes it a little clearer.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Demas,
Yeah.
give it a try.
I was listening to the podcast.
Okay.
When he did his homework.
What?
When he did his homework.
His homework?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, all right. Let's talk about this one. Okay. Doing your homework, at least whenever I did my homework, Demas, was not a action. Was not a sudden action. In fact, it took me hours. So this is what you're saying here is this is an interrupting action. So he did his homework again, looking at the chart. This would be like, okay, I'm going to do my homework. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I see.
That's not very logical. All right.
When he came home.
There you go. Okay. He came home. You arrive. A typical, all right, came home, arrive. Verbs like that are very commonly used in this usage in interrupting action because you arrive. That's not something you do over a period of time. You're in the door. You're here. Okay. Yes. It is possible to talk about, and we're going to look at this in just a minute, two actions of duration happening at the same time. But in that case, all right, and we're going to look at it in a second. I was listening to the podcast while he was doing his homework. This expresses the idea of two actions that take time, both occurring at the same time. So that is possible. We'd have to change your sentence a little bit. We'd probably use while to introduce the other action. Okay. All right, Eunice, you want to give this a try?
Okay. I wasn't paying attention, so I missed the last scene from the movie.
Very nice. The last scene. Okay, you said scene from the movie.
From the movie?
Probably of the movie would be more better. Okay.
Okay.
But I like your example. A negative, definitely. Okay, here's a good example, great example of a negative. Two things: a negative act of duration, and also using a connecting conjunction to connect the two ideas, which nobody's done yet. So good job. Excellent. And very practical in context. Practical usage. Good job. Francisco, give it a try.
Okay, I was turning off the computer when my boss called me.
Okay. Pretty good. Okay, and sometimes it's all about context. You turn off a light switch, all right? You're not going to really see a continuous tense used to describe turning off a light switch. Click. It's kind of done. All right, but turning off the computer involves shutting down all your programs and oh, I don't know, maybe you want to wipe the cookies off the drive and okay, it involves some steps, takes a little time. So this makes perfect sense. Okay, so all right, very good. Okay, use number 2. Well, talk about it for a second, but I don't think we need to really do examples because it's really exactly the same thing as what we just did. Instead of an interrupting action, like missing the last scene of the movie, your boss calling, somebody coming home, the power went out. Instead of that, we're going to look at a specific time as represented by this purple X. For example, last night at 6 p.m., I was eating dinner. At midnight, we were still driving through the desert. It's very common to see this particular adverb used in this function. I'll explain why in just a moment. Yesterday at this time, oh, here's another one that would be very common to see used in this particular usage at this time. I was sitting at my desk. Okay. All right. First of all, still, using still here, still expresses a little bit of an idea of, oh my God, this is taking so much time. We're still waiting. All right, so still is very commonly used with continuous tenses to even further exaggerate the idea of duration. Continuous tenses, in a very general way, all continuous tenses are used to add focus and emphasis to the verb or the action, as well as to express or add emphasis to the idea of a duration of time. So still is a lovely addition because that's what it does. It exaggerates that whole idea of time. Now, very important, last night at 6 p.m. I was eating dinner. Okay, where was I in the process of eating dinner? Well, okay, let's talk about that. In the simple past, a specific time is used to show when an action began or finished. Usually began. Usually a listener would assume that's when the action began, unless the verb actually expresses the idea of finish, like the verb finish or end. I ended at 7 p.m. It's obviously I'm talking about the end, not the beginning, clearly. But if I say I ate dinner at 6 p.m., I would automatically assume that's when you began. All right, unless the verb actual meaning expresses the idea of end, it's going to be automatically assumed began. All right, the past continuous, a specific time only interrupts the action, which means last night at 6 p.m. I was eating dinner. You're not at the beginning, you're not at the end, you're somewhere in the middle. Your potatoes half eaten, your steak's half eaten, who knows? You're somewhere in process. Not the beginning or the end. Okay. All right. Right, so here it is. Last night at 6 p.m. I ate dinner. Is different than okay, it means I started eating at 6 p.m. It's different. Somewhere in process. Okay. As mentioned earlier, as promised earlier, another use, excuse me, another use of past continuous is to show parallel actions. Again, red lines happening over a period of time. Okay. For example, I was studying while he was making dinner. Notice the use of while here to connect these two ideas. While has a meaning of during. It's very similar to saying it expresses the I of during. At the same time as, like that. All right. Again, it doesn't matter where we put the clause. While Ellen was reading, Tim was watching television. Tim was watching television while Ellen was reading. While Tim was watching television, Ellen was reading. Ellen was reading while Tim was watching television. Notice it makes no difference even which clause I introduce with the subordinating conjunction while. It doesn't matter. They're both happening at the same time. So it makes no difference. Okay. Were you listening while I was talking? Question form. Okay. Same thing. Both past continuous. Okay. Notice this next example. This is a little more elaborate. I wasn't paying attention while I was writing. Two things happening at once while I was writing the letter. Another clause, a third clause of the sentence. So I made several mistakes. This is interesting. All right. There were several interrupting actions. The interrupting actions were making mistakes. They interrupted both of these actions, writing and not paying attention. So really this example here, we're looking at two parallel actions of duration with a repeated interrupting action. Still made simple past to show the interrupting action. A lot more complex, but really the same thing. Really, this sentence is doing both things, interrupting action and parallel actions. Okay, what were you doing while you're working? Thomas wasn't working, and I wasn't working either. Here's a negative, an example of two negative actions. It is possible to have a positive and a negative action parallel. Two positives, two negatives, doesn't make any difference. Notice the last example here. They were eating dinner, discussing their plans, and having a good time. Please note, if we don't have a new subject noun, it is perfectly possible, perfectly okay in spoken or written English to work off the same auxiliary verb and add more verbs. They were eating, they were discussing, they were having. Okay, I don't need to have were in each of these phrases. It's not necessary. I can work off the first one. This is true as long as I don't have a new subject noun in this next phrase or clause. If I do, then this is not a phrase anymore. It's a clause. So changes the rules. Okay, so this is perfectly normal, and obviously, quite obviously, the last example is illustrating three parallel actions at the same time. Let's try this one out. Make sure we got the idea. Heidi, at least two parallel actions that take duration.
While I was traveling in Europe, and eating great meals.
What? Okay. What?
Eating great meals, great food.
Oh, okay. While I was traveling in Europe, eating great meals.
Eating great meals.
Okay.
My husband was working in Japan.
Okay. Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. What I just said about if you have a new subject, if you have the same subject noun, you don't need to repeat the was. While I was traveling in Europe, eating great meals. Okay, we do need a, I mean, my mistake, I forgot the comma. While I was traveling in Europe, eating great meals. Okay, then the comma to separate the dependent clause. My husband was working in Japan. Huh, okay, and notice we need to add the was here in this secondary clause because we have a new subject noun. This is correct. Okay, very good. All right, a little more elaborate example. Excellent. Carlos Andreas, you want to give this a try? A sentence that illustrates two actions of duration.
Okay. I was doing my thesis while my mom was cooking lunch.
Your mom was whatting lunch?
Cooking.
Okay, of course. I just didn't hear you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, that's fine. I was doing my thesis while my mom was cooking lunch. Okay. It's a little strange, Carlos and Andreas, because I know doing a thesis takes like true. Of time. All right.
It's true. Very true.
I know it's true, but so it's a little odd. You know, it sounds like your mom was cooking lunch for 3 months or something, but. It might be more clear to say something like, I was working on my thesis.
Okay.
All right? Because there's a difference. All right, this is an interesting point in the English. When we use the simple verb doing, to do as a main verb here, as you have, there's a kind of an idea, a connotation or an idea that you're going to finish it, you know. I'm doing my homework, Mom. Leave me alone. I'm doing my homework. Well, if I say that, there's kind of an idea that I'm going to finish the homework. All right? An alternative that you can use to show that you're really not going to finish in this session, all right, and it might be a little clearer, is to say working on. You're working on something has a connotation or an idea that you're not actually going to finish. All right? Just for context clarity.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Your verb tenses are perfect, though, so good job. Victor.
Okay. The car hit a pole because he was typing while he was driving.
Okay, interesting. Well, we're all familiar with this scenario. Okay, and I like you joining this with a different kind of subordinator, not even a time subordinator, cause and effect. The car hit a pole. All right, past tense because he was typing while he was driving. Okay. Two simultaneous actions of duration, just not a very long duration because BAM! He hit the pole. Great, good example. All right, terrific. Demas, you want to give it a try?
Yeah. She was still talking with me. While I watching a movie.
While I
watching a movie. I was watching a movie.
Yeah, there you go. You caught it. Okay, very good. Yes, there's a new subject noun, I, so you need the auxiliary again. Yep. That'll do her. Yeah, that's okay. Still talking with me. Okay. Okay, it has that slight, subtle meaning of it's kind of annoying, and I know that it's kind of annoying when people are talking to you while you're trying to watch a movie. Okay, so I like the inclusion of still here. Very, very good. Okay, good job, Demas. All right, great. Eunice, you want to give it a try, please?
She was working at home while taking care of the children at the same time. Do I need to say at the same time when I say why?
Not necessarily, but
Oh,
okay. It certainly can help with clarity. I highly encourage my students to include time clauses to reinforce their verb tenses and to clarify context. I'm not against it. I'm always for it, Eunice.
okay.
It adds clarity. Okay. She was working at home while she was taking care of the kids. He added at the same time. Okay, I think it's a good thing. All right. It also adds the idea of maybe a little bit of the idea that this is a challenging thing to do, which obviously it is. So it's better with at the same time, in my opinion. As your editor, I like it. Okay. Francisco, give it a try.
Okay, this morning I was having my breakfast. Drink,
Okay.
drinking a cup of coffee. I'm reading the newspaper.
Okay.
I'm reading a newspaper.
Okay. Okay. Now, I was very tempted to edit a little, and I realized I was editing incorrectly. I was editing bad grammar. I noticed I was going to. I almost wrote just drinking coffee, which I really shouldn't do. That's teaching very bad English. Coffee is an uncountable noun, so especially if I'm writing, I really need to use a device to make it countable. A cup of coffee. I really should do that, especially as I'm demonstrating writing. In spoken English, it is very normal for native speakers to say drinking coffee, even though it's completely incorrect because coffee is an uncountable. Okay, I really should say a cup of coffee. All right, listing things, and this is perfectly correct. Very good. We don't need to add the auxiliary again and again and again. Excellent. Now, thank you very much, Francisco, because this also will act as a segue to our next use. Very good. I can hear Francisco say this, and I can very much picture this in my mind. Well, that brings us to the next use, atmosphere. Using a series of parallel actions to describe the atmosphere at a particular time in the past. I feel, from Francisco's sentence, I totally understand the relaxed morning atmosphere. I can picture the sun just coming in through the window, the birds chirping in the trees, or the crickets in my case, whatever. Okay, I can picture this. That picture in my mind is the atmosphere in Francisco's kitchen this morning. Okay. It may be a long series of such parallel actions to show the atmosphere. For example, when I walked into the office, interrupting action. Okay, several people were busily typing. Some were talking on the phones. The boss was yelling directions. Notice the inclusion of the auxiliary verb each time, because each time we have a new subject noun. Some, the boss. And customers were waiting to be helped. One customer was yelling at a secretariat, waving his hands. Others were complaining to each other about the bad service. Okay, though this is used basically, it can be used in speaking to basically describe the setting, the atmosphere, what it was like, probably because I want to tell a story about my day at the office or something that happened at the office. Okay. Or it's a very common literary device if you're writing, especially, creative writing, making up a story. It's also a common device used for that, to help the reader get the idea of the setting, background, and atmosphere. Okay. But really, all we're doing here is, in interrupting action and then listing parallel actions, we're doing exactly what we have been doing all class. I just want to show you that purpose, and explain that purpose a little bit, show you how that works. Another possible, quite specific, really, usage is to indicate something that's a habit, something that somebody did repeatedly, as in the little graph here. Okay, now I have to disagree with my own material here slightly. I have to clarify it because it's not exactly how I want it to sound. The past continuous with always or constantly, we looked at this yesterday, looking at the present continuous, same idea. It expresses the idea that something irritating or shocking often happened in the past. It can be irritating. We can't think of it as necessarily, it doesn't have to be always negative. It frequently is talking about something negative in context, but it can be something shocking that is actually positive, that it is possible to use past continuous in this way. The concept is quite similar to the expression used to show that used to is used. Used to is always simple past, and it is used to show something that was a habit in the past, or something you did repeatedly in the past that you no longer do, or perhaps a fact that is no longer true. I really don't like this part, and I'm really just going to erase it. It doesn't have to be negative. It is often negative. It is important to include these words always or constantly, and the placement between be and the verb is also, well, that's where the adverb goes. So, okay, let's look at examples. She was always coming to class late. All right. The idea, again, very similar to the concept of used to. He was constantly talking. He annoyed everyone. In spoken English, by the way, we're probably going to add a lot of stress to the adverb. She was always coming to class late. He was constantly talking. They were always complaining, like that. Now, these are all very negative sentences. It doesn't absolutely have to be. She was always donating money to the poor. Okay, well, that's not a negative thing. She was always donating money to the poor. She was such a humble and generous person. Maybe if somebody died and I'm at the funeral and I'm giving the eulogy, this would be a very common construction for such a specific circumstance. She was always giving. She was always smiling. Okay, it doesn't have to be negative. And of course, my intonation, how I say it, makes a huge difference as well. She was always smiling. She was always so polite. Okay. All right. So this is this usage, repetition, and repetition. It's still shocking, though. She was always smiling. It's not normal to always be smiling. Okay, kind of limited time. So let me talk about while and when, just to remind you. I kind of already mentioned it. Okay, talking about clauses. Clauses are groups of words which have meaning. Groups of words, by the way, which have a subject and a verb. They can be independent, which means they are a sentence. That's what a sentence is. Subject, verb, and it makes sense by itself. Independent clause is a sentence. Okay, but are often not complete sentences, or they are dependent clauses. They depend on some help. Okay, there's a lot of when clauses in English. When is probably the most, really, possibly one of the most common, at least. When she called, when it bit me. Other clauses can be with while. When you talk about something in the past, specifically, especially, when is most often followed by simple past, whereas while is usually followed by the past continuous. Okay. For example, I was studying when she called. While I was studying, she called. What is the difference? Not a whole lot. It adds a little emphasis. Well, you can see by use of the bold font here in these examples. I was studying when she called. You're kind of emphasizing this part. While I was studying, she called. So it kind of adds a little emphasis to that part of the sentence.
I have a question.
Yeah, shoot.
For those examples, it doesn't matter what of the two we use, or there are special
No.
situations.
Honestly, it really doesn't matter, especially in spoken English, because you're going to use your pitch and your intonation to add emphasis to whatever you want to. So it really doesn't matter at all in spoken English. In written English, it maybe has a subtle, slight emphasis that you're more concerned with the interrupting action in the first sentence. You're more concerned with the continuous action in the second sentence. But really, spoken English, that's what intonation is for. It really doesn't make any difference. Please note and remember, as always, there are some verbs in English which can just never be used in continuous form, or they shouldn't be. Properly, grammatically, they shouldn't be. These are stative verbs. Dynamic verbs, which we normally think of verbs as being dynamic. Actions: run, walk, swim, cry. These are dynamic. They have movement. Stative verbs, which will be used to describe a feeling, an emotion, a state, stative, state of being, state of existence. These types of verbs cannot be used in a continuous form because you're talking about the way things are at that moment. You're not talking about a long action, really. So they can't be, they're non-continuous verbs. They can't be used for any, not just past, but any continuous tenses. And there's a handful of non-continuous verbs, but there's quite a few mixed verbs. If you use the verb in a specific definition, which is, again, stative, or in a stative purpose to show the state of things, then you can't use a continuous tense. Okay, instead of using past simple with these verbs, you have to use simple past. For example, I simply cannot say Jane was being at my house when you arrived. It doesn't make sense. It's ludicrous. That's her existence. I'm saying she existed. She was existing for a long time at my house. Just doesn't make any sense. Instead, I have to revert back to the simpler form, Jane was at my house when you arrived. Okay, notice this is clearly an interrupting action. It's clearly Jane was probably at the house for a duration, a period of time. But I simply can't use the continuous tense here. This is a mixed verb. For example, if I talk about the verb to be with the meaning of acting or behaving, the children were being good when you arrived. Sure, I can use continuous tense. It's like saying the children were behaving, the children were acting good when you arrived. All right, so this is an example of a mixed verb. There's too much in this lesson. Just real quick, we only have a minute or two left. I just want to show you the passive form. The customer, the action happening to the customer, was being helped. Notice the main verb helped is in the past participle, and the present participle or ing form is the verb to be, followed by our was, which is going to be the auxiliary for the continuous. The customer was being helped by the salesman, an extra phrase. We don't even need it because we don't need to know who actually did the action. It's not necessary. When the thief came into the store, an interrupting action. Again, the most common use of the past continuous. So this is the passive form. Okay. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, and I'm starving, so I'm going to go eat. You guys have a great day, have a good night's sleep, whatever you're doing. Have a great one. All right.